it today, Lesson 4. In this lesson, we'll start by looking at how you can extend your range to cover more of the notes on the musical stave. Turn to page 37 of your Lesson 4 booklet and have a look at figure 15, together with the diagram below it. In the right hand, we'll go as far as the C above middle C. That is, the C note written in the third space on the treble clef. In the left hand, we'll extend to middle C itself. In figure 15, you can see that when this note is written for the left hand, it appears on a ledger line immediately above the top line of the bass clef. Because both hands now extend as far as C, you'll notice that we've taken in a new note, B, which you haven't played before. On the treble clef, this note appears on the third line. On the bass clef, it's written in the space between the top line and middle C. Study the diagram on page 37 for a few minutes, so that you're completely familiar with the positions of these new notes on the stave. Notice, too, which fingers play which notes in the extended range. Place the thumb of your right hand on F, the fourth key along from middle C, and position the rest of your fingers accordingly so that your little finger falls on the next C note above middle C. Do the same with your left hand. Place your little finger on the F below middle C, your ring finger on G, and so on up to your thumb, which should be on middle C itself. Now practice this new range, first with your right hand, then with your left, and then with both hands together. Carry on as long as you like, until your fingers are thoroughly familiar with the new notes. On page 38 are two exercises to play which incorporate the new range. Exercise 35 is for the right hand. Exercise 36 is for the left hand. In exercise 37, for both hands, the left hand goes back to the usual range of C to G, while the right hand extends its range to 8 notes, alternating its position between C to G and F to C, as shown in the diagram at the top of page 39. If you look at the music, you can see that in the first 2 lines, the right hand needs to be in the C to G position. In the third line, it switches to F to C, and in the last line, it goes back to C to G again. For the moment, there's no harm in looking at the keyboard as you move from one position to the other to check that you hit the right notes each time. But after a while, see if you can do it without looking. It's good practice for the future. You'll also notice that in every bar of exercise 37, the left hand plays 2 notes simultaneously. So before you start practicing the exercise yourself, it might be a good idea to refer back to exercises 25 and 26 in Lesson 3, which describe the correct technique for playing two notes together. Now let's hear exercise 37 played through. As Evening Falls is the first of this lesson's tunes for you to play. Here too, the right hand alternates between the C to G and F to C positions, while the left hand remains in the usual C to G position. Let's listen to it now, played with its accompaniment. And now, here's the same piece again, this time without the piano part. Have a look at the diagram at the top of page 41. Shown in black are the notes which you've learnt up to now, while above and below them are some more notes shown in red. We'll be playing these notes in later lessons, but for the moment just concentrate on how they're written on the stave, particularly the ones between the two clefs. You'll remember from Lesson 1 that as a general rule the notes on the treble clef are those played by the right hand, and the notes on the bass clef are those played by the left. But this creates a problem when the right hand has to play notes lower than middle C, in other words, notes that would normally be written on the bass clef, and the same difficulty occurs with the left hand when it has to play notes higher than middle C. Written music deals with these problem notes by putting them on extra ledger lines, below middle C for the treble clef, above middle C for the bass clef. The easiest way to recognize these lines is to think of them as fragments of the opposite clef that have been transported upwards or downwards, depending on which hand plays them. Look at the diagram again. Working down from middle C on the treble clef, there's B, then A on the next ledger line, then G. These are the same B, A and G notes as the ones shown below them on the bass clef. It's just that they've been written for the right hand to play instead of the left. The same applies if you work up from middle C on the bass clef. The next note in red is D, then comes E on the next ledger line. And both notes are the same as the black notes above them. Exercises 38 and 39 will give you some more practice at changing finger positions to extend your range of notes. If you look at the written music for exercise 38, you can see that the notes are divided into groups of 2 bars, each linked by a phrase mark, and that between one group of phrased notes and another there are red marks. These marks remind you when to change finger positions. So, for example, when you come to the end of the second bar in exercise 38, which finishes on a D note played with the index finger, you lift your hand from the keyboard momentarily and then play the same note again with your thumb. Listen to how this sounds now as we play exercise 38. Now here's exercise 39, which is for the left hand. This time, listen out for the slight pauses between the groups of phrased notes. The next 2 exercises ask you to jump a note between your thumb and index finger, so that you get used to extending the span between them. Later we'll be doing this with the other fingers too, enabling you to reach more notes without having to move your hand. First, exercise 40 for the right hand, shown on page 42 of your booklet. Here again there are red marks to indicate where the jumps occur. And now, exercise 41 for the left hand. Now we'll look a little closer at what happens when groups of notes are played simultaneously, in chords. Before you can begin to understand how chords work, and why some groups of notes played together sound better than others, you need to know a little about the way individual notes are related to one another. Figure 16 on page 43 shows three of the most important relationships between notes. In musical terms, they're called intervals. Start by thinking of the relationship between a note and the one immediately adjacent to it. In music, this is called an interval of a second. Figure 16 shows all the intervals of a second between B in the bass clef and G above the treble clef. They're the ones marked in green. Let's go through them now. In the treble clef, C to D, D to E, E to F, F to G, and so on. And in the bass clef, B to C, C to D, D to E, E to F, and so on. The relationship between a note and the next but one along is called an interval of a third. In figure 16, all the intervals of a third are marked in red. In the treble clef, they run C to E, D to F, E to G, and so on. And in the bass clef, B to D, C to E, D to F, E to G, and so on. The blue marks in figure 16 show the relationship between one note and the third one along from it, called an interval of a fourth. Try running through the intervals of a fourth yourself, first on the treble clef, then on the bass clef. Strictly speaking, a chord is formed by three or more notes, one of which gives the chord its name. This note is called the root note of the chord. Later in the course we'll be finding out why this is so, but for the moment let's just look at the four simple chords on page 44. First, C major, in which the root note is the bottom note of the chord. Next, F major, in which the root note is the middle note of the chord. Then G7, in which the root note is the top note of the chord. And an alternative version of G7, in which one note changes. Again, the root note is the top note of the chord. The notes which make up chords like these can be played simultaneously in a chord, or one after the other in an arpeggio. The exercises that follow will help you get familiar with the different ways of playing the four chords we've just looked at. Play the exercises as they're written first, then repeat them, following each of the variations shown below them in the booklet. Let's start with exercise 42 as it's written. And now the first variation, 2 minim beats for each chord. Next, 4 crotchet beats. Now some arpeggios. First, 3 beats. Then 4 beats. And then 4 beats again, this time in a different order. Exercise 43 includes the alternative G7 chord. Now repeated following the variations below. First, minims. Then crotchets. A 3-beat arpeggio, a 4-beat arpeggio, and then another 4-beat arpeggio. Exercise 44 is for the left hand. Now try it with variation 1. Variation 2. Variation 3. Variation 4. Variation 5. And finally, variation 6. Exercise 45 is also for the left hand and includes the alternative G7. Now try it with variation 1, variation 2, variation 3, variation 4, variation 5, And lastly, variation number 6. We end this lesson with another tune for you to play. In On the River, the left hand plays all the chords you've just learnt. And as you listen to it played through now, you can hear how much richer the chords make the piano sound. Now try playing On the River along with the accompaniment. Before the next lesson, go back and practice exercises 42 to 45 a few more times, so that playing the 4 chords and their variations becomes almost second nature. You'll find it very helpful as the course progresses.